Hello and welcome, or welcome back to the Sales Enablement Festival. I hope you're enjoying the event so far because we've got even more great content heading your way. Remember to have your questions at the ready and get the tailored answers you need from the experts themselves. Thank you again to our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this event to life. Don't forget, if you're enjoying the content from the festival, be sure to check out the SEC membership plans. You can find more information about this over on the Sales Enablement Collective website. Sit back and enjoy the next talk. Hello everyone and welcome back to this next talk. This talk is hosted by Christy Wall, who is the Director of Revenue Enablement over at Chainalysis, and she's going to talk to you all about how you can do a no bullshit guide to measuring sales enablement impact. So over to you, Christy.
Thank you, Jack. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you wherever you are in the world. My name is Christy Wall. And I thought I'd kick us off today with a festive sombrero here because it is Cinco de Mayo and I just was on vacation in Mexico a few weeks ago. And I know I'll be celebrating with a margarita in 9.25 hours, but you know, who's counting? So to introduce myself, I am the Director of Revenue Enablement at Chainalysis. We are a crypto compliance and investigation company with the goal of combating fraud and illicit activity on the blockchain. So think darknet markets, money laundering, terrorist financing, and all the other crazy things that people try to do on blockchain. Fascinating work, absolutely love it. I've been in sales enablement for 6 years, and over those years, I've had a real range of responsibilities. So everything from building programs from scratch to managing both technical and partner enablement, to creating external customer training and certification programs. On a personal note, I've lived in Denver, Colorado for 10 years, but I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, so go Cardinals. My favorite hobby is running. I've completed over 25 half marathons, 3 full marathons, and am currently training for a 50K race in June, which is 32 miles. And I don't know why I signed up for that, but I did. I'm not fast by any means, but I do very much enjoy it because it allows me to have as many margaritas and tortilla chips as I want. But today we're talking about sales enablement metrics. So quick little story. When I first started out in sales enablement, the CEO of my company walked over to my desk, sat down on the corner and said, "So Christy, how are you going to measure this?" And of course, I, brand new in sales enablement, meekly responded with, quota attainment? Question mark. So then he took my mouse, and I remember this vividly. He took my mouse and he grabbed my laptop. He started building a presentation on my computer on how I needed to be measuring enablement, which is kind of terrifying. But I don't remember what he proposed, or what he created on my laptop. But the point that stuck with me is this: metrics matter. The C-suite cares, executives care, leaders care, investors care. So as enablement practitioners, we've really got to make it a priority. Now, there are a lot of thoughts and opinions out there on how to measure sales enablement. And I'm going to throw out maybe an unpopular opinion that some of them are kind of BS. So we can measure sales enablement metrics like trainings or courses completed, tool system usage, maybe content that we create alongside marketing, but that's just all that's doing is quantifying our activities, not necessarily the result. And the only result that matters is revenue. Did you hit your numbers? So why claim success when we're just quantifying our enablement busyness? Now we can also look at sales metrics, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this list, and you're probably measuring, some or most of these items. But here's the underlying, BS problem with these numbers. There are so many factors that go into sales performance and so many elements that impact a seller's success. So, for example, what about a rep's territory? Is it greenfield? Has it already been built out? What about competitors in the space? Are they concentrated in a certain region? And what about the lucky reps who walk into a new company and into opportunities that are maybe a few steps away from the finish line? It's almost impossible, I'd say, to claim, well, we have the most amazing sales enablement program, and that's why we're hitting our numbers. So that begs the question, what are we to do? How do we know that our activities are actually truly impacting revenue? This is where I get excited. The sales velocity equation. So full disclosure, I can't take credit for this idea. I, one, didn't come up with the equation, and two, it was actually one of my former employees on my enablement team that had the idea to track our efforts this way, and he even had to convince me up front. But eventually I came to find that the approach was brilliant. And I do think that all practitioners at least need to know about this approach. So what is sales velocity? Well, it's a combination of 4 different factors. 1, the number of opportunities. 2, the average deal size. 3, your win rate. And then 4, your average deal cycle. So you multiply the first 3 together and then divide by the 4th. This spits out a number, which we can call it revenue pulled in over a period of time, whether that's months, weeks, days, kind of whatever you're using for that denominator for the deal cycle. Now you can calculate this a couple of different ways, meaning you can calculate sales velocity at the organizational level using aggregate data from all of your sellers, or you can do it by individual seller or by territory or by region, or however you want to slice and dice it. So it's kind of up to your business and what the insights you're looking to get. So to explain this a little bit more, I do want to look at the equation using elements other than sales numbers. So we are going to replace everything with the ingredients needed to make a margarita. So you've got limes, Cointreau or Grand Marnier or whatever orange liqueur of your choosing, tequila, and sugar. I left out the salt because not everybody loves it. So if you have a nice, well-balanced equation with appropriate levels of each ingredient, you get a delicious margarita. But we know life doesn't always work that way. Let's say you're making a margarita. You're feeling good because it's Cinco de Mayo, so you put in 4 shots of tequila. You're ready to have a good time. You're going to have a giant margarita. It will be delicious, but it will knock you down in 10 minutes flat and leave your head throbbing for 2 days. Now, let's say you go to make another margarita maybe the next week. You have PTSD from the giant margarita that you made. So the next time you go to make one, you only put in a little bit of tequila and you add more sugar to cut through the alcohol because you're scared and you don't want to be hungover. And now you have a teeny tiny margarita that will spike your insulin levels like crazy. So in the same way, the various metrics that make up the sales velocity equation matter. You can have a giant margarita, which is fantastic. I love them. But maybe one element is skewed. A seller may have a high sales velocity score, but it might be due to one extreme metric, and it's important to understand why their score is that high. On the other hand, there may be some bottleneck at an organizational level that's blocking your kind of aggregate sales velocity from increasing, and you need to understand what that is. So why does this matter to sales enablement? I'm going to say this, and this is the one thing I want you to take away, aside from that you should have a margarita. The sales velocity equation gives us, as sales enablement practitioners, insights into where to focus our efforts to increase velocity and thus increase sales. So insights, where to focus our efforts to increase velocity. We have to look out for the patterns that emerge over time at both the organizational level and the individual level or team level to understand what we can do to increase the speed at which we bring in revenue, assuming that that will increase our actual revenue numbers. So let's dig in a little bit. Let's say we see sales velocity declining quarter over quarter, and we need to dig into elements that maybe have changed. So we first take a look at the number of opportunities. Did that decline? Do we need to work on tactics for prospecting and building pipeline? What about our outbound messaging? What's going on in terms of getting more opportunities or not getting more opportunities, and what can we do to mitigate that? Then we can take a look at the average deal size. Did that decline, and if so, why? Do we need to focus on pricing conversations? Do we need to talk more with our sellers about negotiating on value? How are we handling upsell and cross-sell opportunities? What do we need to improve there? And regarding win rate, maybe if that's declining, we need a training effort centered on competitive positioning, or we need to look to see if we're talking to the right people and getting to the right buyers. Are we actually aligned to the right executive priorities within our customers and prospects? And then when it comes to deal cycles, are they increasing, which would make the sales velocity go down? Do we need to look into our sales processes? Are there bottlenecks that various tools or systems might be able to fix internally? Do we need to better define go forward action plans with our customers? What's causing our deal cycle to increase or to not decrease? So you can see how analyzing and defining these trends over time helps inform us of where we should hone those enablement activities. And that alignment is ultimately what informs us, whether or not we're making an impact. So I do, as much as I love margaritas and tequila, I do want to add in some numbers as an example, instead of just talking about Cinco de Mayo. I think this will illustrate the power of sales velocity and the impact we really can make in enablement. So let's look at this scenario. Let's pretend that this is the current situation at our company. Based on these very random, arbitrary numbers, we have a sales velocity of 56, meaning we bring in revenue at a speed of $56 per day. Now, let's say we really focus our enablement efforts over the course of the year with various programs and tools, and we're able to increase each of the numerators by 10%. Along the same fashion, we are able to decrease the denominator by 10%. So these aren't necessarily huge increases overall, but look what it does to our sales velocity. Increases it by 46%. So we now bring in revenue at a speed of $82 a day compared to $56 a day. So by just slightly improving each element of this equation, we can make a huge impact on revenue. Okay, so hopefully, the concept of the sales velocity equation is clear. Before you go pour yourself a drink, it is 7 a.m. here, so I will not be doing that for a while. Before you go pour yourself a drink and create, your own sales velocity report and you're off and running, there are a few important points that I do want to make. So important point number 1, sales velocity is a data point. It is not the data point. It's an indicator of health and your seller behavior, but success is hitting the number, always full stop. Sales velocity can sit alongside revenue goals, quota attainment, customer acquisition cost, etc. And it's important to look at the entire picture as you're assessing, the health and performance of your team. I will also say that sometimes, and I had a recent experience with this, sometimes the sales velocity equation doesn't match up one-to-one with quota attainment. So your top performers on quota attainment, or total revenue brought in may actually not match up with the top sales velocity scores, which is really interesting and something to pay attention to. So as an example, what I just experienced, one of the top sales velocity scores at my current company is a fairly young but very solid account executive who does a ton of small deals. So he doesn't bring in the most revenue, but he's really, really good at closing smaller, frequent, maybe a little bit more transactional deals. So now that I see that and I know that, I'm going to go to him and feature him on our internal enablement podcast, because I want him to give us all insights on how he effectively moves deals through the cycle and keeps such a low deal cycle time, in the hopes that other sellers can take away some tips and tricks for their own opportunities. So sales velocity gives enablement practitioners insights so that we can coach and adjust our programs and training accordingly. And it shows us where we can make a difference, how we can influence the metrics that ultimately lead to success, but it's not meant to be the metric of success. All right, important point number 2, it's only as good as your data. We all know the adage, garbage in, garbage out. If your CRM data isn't clean, your sales velocity score will not reflect an accurate picture. So your CRM hygiene is crucial to gaining the right insights from the sales velocity equation. So moral of this story is, if you don't have clean data, clean it up. Important point number 3, the power behind sales velocity comes when it's reviewed over time. So as a standalone metric, sales velocity actually doesn't tell us that much. It tells us how fast we are at bringing in revenue, but that doesn't really matter until we see if we're improving or not. So it's important to build cadences into your calendar for reviewing sales velocity, whether that's monthly, quarterly, annually. I'd recommend it more than annually. But just make sure that you have a picture over time. And then the last important point is, this really requires close alignment with sales ops or rev ops, whatever you call the operations team at your organization. You've got to work closely with sales ops to ensure that your data is accurate. I rely entirely on our ops team to pull in the data into a report or dashboard for me, because they're the source of truth for the numbers, and I certainly don't want to mess anything up. So I would say, don't try and do this on your own unless you're also operations and enablement. But do just work really closely with ops to make sure that you have the right numbers. With that, I will turn it over to questions.
Thank you so much, Christy. That was a brilliant presentation, and absolutely loved the margarita analogy, as I'm sure many other people did. If anyone does have any questions for Christy, please do drop them into the chat. She'll be more than happy to answer them for you all. So the first question is, the average deal size, win rate, and average deal cycle are elements that are more stable over a long period of time. However, the number of opportunities can be highly affected by the time of year. How does this formula account for this? I think that was directed to your previous one.
Yeah, I would say the formula itself, that's where measuring over time comes in. If you know that there's different buying cycles, different buying trends at different points in the year, that's where it's going to be really important to look at those trends and see, are we seeing dips, say, in the summer because people are on holiday? Does it spike up at the end of the year? And knowing those trends helps you interpret that sales velocity meaning, and then helps you adjust your enablement programs accordingly. But I would just say, being able to follow those patterns over time, make sure that your assumptions are correct in terms of the buying cycles, and then just take that into account when you're actually building your programs. That's really the only impact that it makes, in my opinion.
Yeah, nice, good answer. Yeah. Okay, the next question has just come in. It says, Aside from the sales velocity formula data point, what else do you consider to be a crucial factor to track?
The biggest factor for my team and my organization at the stage that we're in is quota attainment. I would also say in my former roles, I've looked really closely at not only time to first deal for new hires, but time to first viable deal, meaning the first deal that they pipe and close. Because kind of going back to one of my first points, as a new seller, you can walk into an organization and have some opportunities handed to you, which is a beautiful thing. But that is kind of skews that time to first deal metric because you may not have actually done much to close it. So taking a look at that time to first viable or whatever term you want to use, that's been really interesting to see how long it takes for a new hire to really get into the deal cycle and close their first deal. So I would answer that question with 1, quota attainment, and 2, time to first deal alongside time to first viable deal. If hopefully that I articulated that well.
Yeah, no, nice answer. The next question is, love the session, and remember, it's always 5 p.m. somewhere. Have you applied this for new hires as well in terms of time to ramp?
In terms of time to ramp, the short answer is kind of. So we measure sales velocity for the entire sales team. So I don't necessarily distinguish when we're measuring velocity by like, we're only measuring it for reps who have been here for 6 months or reps who have been here for a year. I do just throw everybody into the same bucket, but I know they're typically at the lower end, right? Because they haven't closed many deals, haven't had much experience with the company yet. So I know that they're going to be at the very bottom, but I do start tracking it right away because I can see how quickly they jump up, right? And that's an indicator of their knowledge retention, of their sales skills, of how well they're doing as they continue to climb. Climb meaning be there at the company for months, years, whatever measure you choose. So I would say start measuring it as soon as a new rep comes on board, or first quarter, first month, and then track how quickly they're accelerating.
Yeah, nice. Hopefully that answers your question, Ruth. So the next question is, how often do you update the sales velocity? Weekly, monthly? Would you suggest to break it also down by sales rep?
Okay. Ooh, this is a good question. Yes, break it down by sales rep. I'll go into that in a minute. And we look at it quarterly. We have the ability to track monthly, but I think quarterly is just a more natural cadence for sales teams. So that's how I like to look at it. And then as far as the breakdown, here's what I recommend and here's what I do. We have an aggregate sales velocity score at the very high level. So taking in all of our Salesforce data and spitting out one big holistic number for the entire sales team. Then we have it split down by region. So we've got Americas, EMEA, and APAC, as well as our public sector business. That's really interesting because, the public sector side sometimes they have much longer deal cycles than some of the private sector businesses in APAC or Americas. So we get some insights there, by region. And then on the more individual coaching level, I would say it's really important to do it by rep, because if you can see that certain reps are struggling in certain areas or elements, that's an opportunity for coaching. And that's an opportunity to go to their leader and say, hey, this is what the data shows. I'm not sure what you're experiencing with your seller, but it's something to be aware of. And it's something to coach them on if you notice, certain behaviors, certain patterns. So I actually think really from the top down, it's crucial along every single point.
Nice. So yeah, the next question is, the sales cycle time varies from product to product, offering to offering, industry to industry, etc. So what are the various things we should consider to understand sales effectiveness?
I would say this largely depends on your business. So if you already know that the buying cycles by product or by industry vary, I would say you could split out the velocity equation that way too. There's no reason you can't, assuming your CRM is set up this way, to split out those industries and those products. I still would say it's important to see it holistically. But I do think if you already know you've got a significant difference amongst the different products or different industries, it's probably more accurate to split it out that way. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
So the next question is, how would you track the impact of readiness on quota attainment or any outcome metric?
That's a really tough question for me. And this is where I might differ from other sales enablement practitioners. I don't know. It's really, really, really hard to tie enablement programs and enablement activities to quota attainment. I mean, there's only so much we can impact, and control is not a great word, but manage on the enablement side. And so much of it comes down to the individual seller and the individual situation. So I'll go out on a limb and say, I really don't look at enablement as it relates to quota attainment. I look at quota attainment as a health indicator of our entire team. But the sales velocity is where I really get insights into how to focus my efforts. I know that's not what a lot of people do, and I might be going against the grain, but I've just found that it's really hard for me to say, oh, we're hitting quota because of me. I know that what I'm doing, what my team is doing has an impact on quota, but it's really hard to make that direct link. It's really tough. Happy to discuss that more. I'm happy to have someone change my mind on that. So please reach out to me if you want to debate it and discuss it, because I would absolutely love to learn more and hear other perspectives on it.
Yeah, no, that was a good answer. So the next question is, what's the best way to forecast performance, and what's the highest level of confidence that it can be expected to achieve?
Can you repeat that?
What's the best way to forecast performance, and what's the highest level of confidence that it can be expected to achieve?
So if we're talking about that in the context of sales velocity, which I know I'm making an assumption there, I would say that forecasting performance really comes down to looking at kind of the average for a region or a product or an industry, or, however we've talked about splicing and dicing this data. I would say having kind of a benchmark based on current performance should give you an idea of future performance. Now, basing future performance on historical isn't always like the best approach, but if I were to choose a perspective, I would say, however you're looking at the data, whether it's big picture, kind of narrowed down, just benchmark that and use that as your baseline. Best
cool. Yeah.
way to do it.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And the last question for this session is, did you notice the impact of remote selling on the average deal cycle length?
So I'll answer this kind of in two parts. One is we got our sales velocity dashboard at Chainalysis set up at the very beginning of this year. So I don't actually have the data to specifically say the impact of remote selling on the deal cycle time. Anecdotally, I can say that didn't see much of an impact. That is probably a bit based on our business, and just the types of people we're selling into and the normal buying cycles across our private and public sector industries. It's a great question. I just don't have the data to back it up, other than to say we didn't see any dramatic shift at Chainalysis over the year and a half that I've been here. But awesome thing to track, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And one final question from me, actually. I've asked this to a few of our speakers before, so I'd love to get your input as well, is what advice would you give to anyone who is new to a role in sales enablement?
Ooh, any advice?
Any advice?
Any advice? Wear costumes. No, I think as I sit here with this ridiculous thing, my best piece of advice to someone in enablement or a new person in enablement would be have fun with it. I mean, we come in as enablement practitioners, and I think there's so many best practices, and we go to conferences like this where we hear all these strategies and tactics and things we can do, and it's exciting. But I would say don't lose that creative, fun element, because that's what ultimately keeps your sellers engaged with enablement programs. And that's what helps them to remember, the different concepts that you're trying to teach or solidify in their brains. I've done like video, like launches for new tools or systems, and I've announced it wearing a lobster costume. And it's completely ridiculous, and I can't take myself too seriously when I do it. But people go back and they say, oh yeah, that was in the lobster video. And so it's just finding, and you don't have to, be that outrageous, but finding ways to really keep it fresh, keep it engaging, whatever it is you're doing will ultimately help people remember and engage with whatever content you're trying to put out there. So that would be my recommendation. Buy a sombrero. It's kind of fun. Amazon, $99.
Good deal. So have fun and wear costumes.
Wear costumes.
Well, Christy, thank you so much for taking time to present and answer the questions. And to everyone who did get involved, thank you so much for taking part. If you would like to ask Christy any more questions or get advice on costumes, I'm sure you can reach out to Christy over on LinkedIn, and she'll be more than happy to continue the conversation over there. So that being said, Christy, thank you again. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Christy. Bye, everyone.